websites. Then they see the YouTube thing, and they pick up this guy, Matt, I think his name is Matthew Keyser or something. Keyser is the guy who built the video streaming site, and he's the best programmer. So he's like, I think I can make a YouTube for this stuff. And we can, instead of having these directories where we send the traffic away, we could just keep the traffic. And at the time, they had already kind of like, started to discover things. They're like, oh, people like this, people like this. They were just creating other directories. And eventually they looked at Vivid, who was the king at the time, and they were like, we should make our own Vivid. And so in the same office, they created Pornhub, the website that was going to host all this stuff. And they created a company called Brazzers, which is a producer of content. So they created a content producer and they created the platform, the network.
Like Netflix making their own shows.
Exactly. Or like, FTX had this, a sister company that, and by the way, nobody knew these companies were linked. So everybody thought these were two, not only unlinked companies, they thought they were enemies. Because at the time, all of the studios hated the platforms that were giving away the content for free. People didn't know that one of the biggest studios, was actually the owner of one of the biggest websites at the time. And so in the same way that there was FTX and Alameda living in the same house, kind of sharing funds, Brazzers and Pornhub were doing the same thing. People just didn't know. In fact, the guy came out and was like quoted. He was like, that would make no sense. Why would we do that? That would be 100% against our core interest as Brazzers to do that. We hate the platforms. And meanwhile, he was also the owner. So these guys start this thing and it takes off like a rocket. They're like, dude, we have no idea what we fell into. We were sleeping in the office. We worked every single day, every weekend. We couldn't hire enough. This was now like 2007 or 8, I think. So they weren't the first mover, but they ended up becoming the biggest mover. And here's why. So they basically scaled this thing better than anyone else could. And one of the keys was they had Brazzers. They had their own content that was not pirated, or like it was pirated, but they owned it. So they didn't care, that they could use on the network. So even when other stuff got taken down, they still had more content than other people.
All right, everyone, a quick break to tell you about HubSpot. And this one's really easy for me to talk about because I'm going to show you a real life example. So I've got this company called Hampton, joinhampton.com. It's a community for founders doing between $2 million all the way up to like $250 million a year in revenue. And one of the ways that we've grown is we've created these cool surveys. And so we have a lot of founders who have high net worths, and we'll ask them all types of questions that people typically are embarrassed to ask, but provide a lot of value. So things like how much the founders pay themselves each month, how much money they're spending each month, what their payroll looks like, if they're optimistic about the next year and their business, all these questions that people are afraid to ask, but well, we ask them anyway, and they tell us in this anonymous survey. And so what we do is we created a landing page using HubSpot's landing page tool. And it basically has a landing page that says, here's all the questions we asked. Give us your email if you want to access it. And then I shared this page on Twitter, and we were able to get thousands of people who gave us their email and told us they want this survey. And I could see, did they come from social media? I can see, did they come from Twitter, from LinkedIn, basically everywhere else that they could possibly come from. I'm able to track all of that. And then I'm able to see over the next handful of weeks, how many of those people actually signed up and became a member of Hampton. In other words, I can see how much revenue came from this survey, how much revenue came from each traffic source, things like that. But the best part is I can see how much revenue came from it. And a lot of times it takes a ton of work to make that happen. HubSpot made that super, super easy. If you're interested in doing this, you can check it out, HubSpot.com. The link's in the description. And I'll also put the link to the survey that I did so you can actually see the landing page and how it worked and everything like that. I'm just going to do that call to action then. And it's free. Check it out in the description. All right, now back to MFM.
And so they scaled up. They go from basically like just 3 friends to like 80 people, 150 people, 250 people. And they're hiring friends and family. And they're like, dude, they're like, where do we have an office? They're like, no. Just, they started buying houses next to each other, just created a neighborhood. And they're all just working out of that, like that one area.
Bootstrapped?
Bootstrap. No investors, no nothing.
So just growing because word of mouth traffic. And obviously people love what their product, and they're just coming back over and over again.
And the key is that this guy Keyser was an SEO savant. He came out later and he goes, we were the #1 rank for porn and sex on Google. He's like, do you know how competitive that is? He's like, that's what I did. I pulled that off. I became the #1 search. That's how we defeated all of the other things. And then we had content that wasn't getting taken down. So they grow it to 250. They make one of the guys' brothers the CEO. They're like, you're the CEO. You have some business experience. You do this. So that guy starts doing a roll-up, like a private equity roll-up. So he starts buying up all the other ones who are afraid of getting sued. And so he's buying them up for cheap. And he's just consolidating power and just creating one big mega behemoth. Because then he could fight whoever was going to sue them, because now they owned all the traffic. So they had something, to fight with. And so he starts building this thing up. And by the way, there's this whole like industry is so funny because you think of it as a sketchy thing, but like one of the sites, for example, that they bought, it was called Homegrown.